Today I'm going to be covering 3 projects I think every DIYer slash woodworker should make. Since these are going to be beginner projects, we're going to limit the amount of tools we use to create these. If you want to build these to the same exact specs I did, there's a free cut list down in the video description. Check that out. Big thanks to HyperTough for sponsoring this video. Let's do this. My angle on this video is to aid those that may want to get started building things themselves, but you may be intimidated and not completely sure where to start. Anyone that's going to take their hobby or craft serious, you need a workbench. So after looking around, I came across these brackets, which I think can help build a sturdy workbench. Obviously, we're going to use the brackets, some 4x4s, 2x4s, and a sheet of plywood. The first thing I'm going to do is measure out the legs. Those are going to be 32 inches tall. I'm going to carry that measurement across all 4 pieces. The lumber I'm using here is 4x4 Douglass Fir. 4x4 pressure treated lumber is also an option. I carried the reference line all the way around the lumber. Next, I'll set the saw blade to its maximum cut capacity. Quite often you can make this cut in 2 passings, but instead I'm going to do it in 3. I'll make the first cut, turn the lumber, make one more cut, turn it again for the final cut. Doing it this way allows you to put the blade inside of the previous cut, which you can use as a guide, which this would help eliminate double saw marks, delivering a smooth finish. Repeat that until you have your 4 legs. Now I've seen different configuration with this bracket, so I'm going to pick the one that works for me. Right now, I'm addressing the top bracket, which I'm going to use the 2x4 to set the height of the bracket. Once I confirm the location, I will clamp it. Then drill a pilot hole, then install the screws. Now I'll set the bottom bracket. The bracket can be as high or low as you prefer. I just grab one of the scrap pieces of 4x4, which I'm going to use as a guide to set all of the bottom brackets. Then I'll repeat the previous step, drill a pilot hole, and add the screws. The first leg is complete, and I'll repeat the same thing for the rest of them. The workbench is getting figured out and built in real time. So what I'm doing here is trying to decide how wide do I want the legs to be, and then I'm going to take the inside measurement of the legs and then make that reference mark and cut the 2x4. So I'm going to give that a quick clean up. That looks pretty good, so I need 3 more of those, 4 total. As a reference, in order to keep any of the wood from splitting, every screw I add, I drill a pilot hole first. I have the set of legs complete, and now I need to figure out the span of it. Again, this is up to anyone's discretion. I was thinking like a 7-foot workbench, and then I decided to shrink it down. After cutting the parts to the desired length, I place them in the bracket. Next, I'll clamp and add the screws. At this point, I have majority of the screws installed, so I'm going to shift my focus over to adding on the bottom. I'll take a couple 2x4s, slide them under the workbench, and clamp them at the bottom of the workbench. I'll add a second 2x4 in this space, mostly for aesthetic spacing. My first intention was to put these slats at the top portion of the 2x4s running the long span of the workbench. Then it hit me that I could favor them towards the bottom and use the sides as a barrier so things doesn't roll off from under there. So to cut back on all the measurements, I decided to take 4 scrap pieces of 2x4 to set the spacing before adding the screws. I spaced things this way starting on both sides and worked my way towards the middle. By the time I worked towards the middle, the spacing shrunk, which I was okay with. Alright, so this is starting to come together. I'll give the top a 1.5-inch overhang on all sides. So whatever the size of your workbench is, make the top 3 inches bigger in length and width. The blade I have on this saw is for cutting rough lumber. As you can see, I placed masking tape on the reference line I have marked. This will dramatically reduce wood tear out, especially when you're going against the grain. Now I'll go around and mark all the locations for where the hardware fasteners is going to be to secure the top to the base. Now you can use corner braces, which I've used in the past, but for this project I'm using these figure 8 top fastener. I'm using a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to counterbore the hole, which allowed the hardware to sit flush with the top of the 2x4. Now I'll drive the screw in to secure the hardware. That looks good, so I'm going to move on to the rest of them. Now I'll rest the top on the workbench and then center it up. Lastly, I'll give the workbench a quick sand to clean up some of the rough areas. And while I'm at it, I'll install any screws that I didn't install going through the bracket. If you have a circular saw, it's almost a must that you have a circular saw guide. When I'm cutting construction lumbers like 2x4, 4x4, a carpenter square is sufficient to use as a guide. When you start cutting sheet goods, a saw guide is one of the more efficient ways to cut them down. They are quick to make, and if you make them yourself, they can be quite cost effective. I'm using a thin sheet of ply with a 1x2 piece of lumber. I clamp the 1x2 lumber to the plywood sheet. Now I use a combination square to make sure I have the exact spacing all the way down. This spacing doesn't really matter how big it is because we're going to use the saw to trim it. Just for reference, I have a 3-inch overhang. I'm also using a clamp in the middle to try and pull the board straight. Without disturbing the clamps too much, I'll add some screws in from underneath. You just want to make sure the head of the screw is below the surface of the plywood. You can double check your work with a straight edge. I'm using a level. I'm making sure there are no gaps. Now I'll attach a stop block to the plywood. This will help with squaring your guide to your panel. Now I'll clamp and add screws. I'll attach 2 pieces of masking tape on the guide. The tape should fall within the location of the blade. Now I'm going to take the circular saw and ride the fence of the board and cut the panel. I'll reposition the saw and cut the narrow side of the guide. Now I'll give it a light sand and attach some sandpaper. The sandpaper is not needed, but it's really helpful to prevent the guide from shifting. Now, to criticize myself, if I was to do this again, I'd likely add 2 strips or just add a few more strips going the other direction. Again, this is not needed, but I have it on hand, so I applied some wax to the surface of the guide. This should help the saw with gliding across it. So if you have locking pliers and ever want to extend the use of them, here's a tip. If you can find a substitute, go for it. I'm using a sprinkler hose here. I'm just going to trim it down into small pieces and slip it on the jaws. And this will work well for a lot of things without damaging the material. I don't want a large clamp in my way, so I'm just going to clip this onto the side. Now I can put my focus on ripping this piece of wood. And as you can see, the saw guide is quite handy. I ran out of 4x4, otherwise I would have made at least 4 of these. I'm going to call them the helping hand. These were made for 3 specific reasons. The first reason, allow you to raise your subject so you can cut on top of the workbench. And for reason number 2, if you're often joining plywood, this is a perfect way to hold your plywood while you join your parts. While there may be other uses, the third one I have in mind is to create a great holding platform to sand the edges of plywood or apply edge banding. Big thanks to HyperTough for partnering with me and supporting the channel. With just a few tools, you can start your DIY journey. These HyperTough tools are made for everyday makers and DIYers, delivering the power you need for your next or your first project at a value that keeps your workshop stocked without breaking the budget. Throughout the video, I use a 20-volt drill driver. It's compact, lightweight, and powerful enough to handle your everyday task. When the drill is not strong enough, you'll want an impact wrench, designed to take on tougher job while still being easy to handle in the workshop. Perfect for dealing with heavy-duty fasteners such as lag bolts. You'll never know when you need an angle grinder, which is a great problem solver for cutting, grinding, and even smoothing materials like metal, tiles, concrete, and even sharpening tools. Last but not least, the Click Fit accessories. Now you can streamline your toolkit, keeping everything organized, allowing you to have quick access, work fast with few interruptions. Be sure to check the video description to check them out. Grab them at Walmart or walmart.com. There you go. 3 projects every DIYer should have on their to-do list. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button, turn on your bell notification so you don't miss the next video. See you in the shop.